The question is that this bill be now read a second time. The member for Hughes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It's pleased this evening to speak on the Australian Citizenship Legislation Amendment, strengthening the requirements for Australian citizenship and other measures bill. Deputy Speaker, it's commonly said out there in the public that if a member of the Labor Party tells you it's raining, you need to go outside and check. And we've seen that over and over again in recent years. We saw, of course, the Medi scare campaign, completely fraudulent. Member after member of the Labor Party saying something that's completely untrue. And yet here we go again, exactly the same thing during this debate. Now, earlier today, Deputy Speaker, the member for Watson said, and I quote, and I think I've got the quote right, and he claimed, he said, "You need university-level English unless you come from one of the 5 white countries where English is the official language. That is what is in front of us." And he went on, Deputy Speaker, again I hope I've got the quote right, "It just happens that of all of the 5 countries that have English as their official language, 5 countries deemed a white majority. Singapore doesn't make the cut. India doesn't make the cut." Now, there's a few things that need to be said about those words, Deputy Speaker. Firstly, let's look at the claim that this legislation requires university-level English. Let's put the facts on the table and let's see the Australian people make the decision whether the Labor Party are again engaging in another misleading and deceptive ploy to deceive the Australian public. Firstly, Deputy Speaker, the IELTS test, which is the International IELTS, or otherwise International English Language Testing System. Let's have a look. Now, Deputy Speaker, there are actually 2 streams of this. There's an academic module and there's also a general module. Now, the academic module, and I'll read out, Deputy Speaker, what it says about this. It says, "The academic module is intended for those who want to enrol in universities and other institutions of higher education for professionals such as medical doctors and nurses who want to study or practice in an English language country." Now, if I'd listened to the members of the Labor Party during this debate, you would have been led to believe that it's the academics test that is being given. But that is simply untrue. We've had each member that has spoken on the other side of this House, Deputy Speaker, has misled the Australian public by creating the perception that this is an academic test when it is simply not. It is the general training test. And what it says that about, Deputy Speaker, it says the general test is intended for those planning to undertake non-academic training or gain work experience for migration purposes. That is the test that this legislation deals with. I'll repeat it again. It is the general training is intended for those planning to undertake non-academic training. And yet, we've had member after member of the Labor Party claim that the test is for university-level English. That is completely and utterly incorrect. And let's all have the band 6 that's required. Now, the actual test, Deputy Speaker, there are 9 possible bands that someone could get basically a result or a mark that you could get from that test. And remember, this is the non-academic test. Now, there's a band 9. There's a good argument we could have a band 9, and they describe band 9 as someone that has fluent operational command of the language, appropriate, accurate, fluent with complete understanding. That's not the test we're asking for. We're not asking for a band 9. What about a band 8? A band 8, the description is someone that has fully operational command of the language with only occasional unsystematic inaccuracies and inappropriacies. Misunderstandings may occur in unfamiliar situations. Handles complex, detailed argumentation well. We could ask for a band 8, Deputy Speaker, in an English test, but we're not asking for that. What about a band 7? Maybe let's go down, so we're not 8, We're not 9, we're not 8, maybe band 7. Band 7 says, has operational command of the language, though with occasional inaccuracies, inappropriacies and misunderstandings in some situation, generally handles complex language well and understands detailed reasoning. Well, a band 7, Deputy Speaker, could be a good standard for the test, but we are not asking for a band 7. We are asking for a band 6. And band 6, Deputy Speaker, of the results which I describe, the results that you achieve for a band 6, has general effective command of the language despite some inaccuracies, inappropriacies and misunderstandings. Can use and understand fairly complex language, particularly in familiar situations. That is the band we're asking for. Band 6. It is not a university level of education. It is band 6 under the non-academic test, and I'll repeat it again, we are asking for has generally effective command of the language despite some inaccuracies and some misunderstandings. Surely that is not too big an ask. We could go down to band 5 or band 4, Deputy Speaker, which maybe the other side asked for, but let's just have a look what band 5 says, if you think band 6 is too high. Band 5 says, has partial command of the language, coping with overall meaning in most situations, although is likely to make many mistakes. Do we really want to have an English language test where the result that we ask for is defined as someone that is likely to make many mistakes? I put to you, Deputy Speaker, that someone, an English language test, that the results of your test is someone that likes to make many mistakes, is simply not high enough. And therefore, band 6, under the non-academic stream, is actually quite the appropriate test that we should use. So I'd call on members of the opposition. If you want to debate this piece of legislation, and if you want to argue points of it, do not misrepresent the basic fact. Do not go out and claim there is a requirement of university-level English when that is simply untrue. We are not requiring the university test. We're requiring a band 6, Deputy Speaker, which is effectively a 50% pass mark. Now, the other thing I'd like to comment on, Deputy Speaker, which I do so, but I wish I didn't have to. The member for Watson said in his speech, unless you come from one of the 5 white countries. Dog whistling works both ways. Dog whistling, false accusations of racism are also dog whistling. And if you look at the member's speech where he said the 5 white countries are exempt and implied that it had something to do with the predominant colour of the skin of people of those countries, Deputy Speaker, which were, of course, New Zealand, the USA, Canada, Ireland and the UK, who are exempt from this test, the English language test, to say that has something to do with being a white country or a non-white country and implying that's the reason that is put in, Deputy Speaker. Well, Deputy Speaker, that is dog whistling and that is a disgrace. And I'll tell you for why, Deputy Speaker. The examples that were that Singapore doesn't make the cut. It has nothing to do with whether Singapore is a white country or a non-white country. Recent data, Singapore's own census, Deputy Speaker, so that it's around about only 34 to 35% of homes in Singapore have English as their first language. So you've got something like more than 65% of people in Singapore living in that country that English is not the language that they use at home. Their 2010 census, Singapore, Deputy Speaker, says about 550,000 people. 10% of the population has no English at all. That is the reason why Singapore is exempt. It has nothing to do whether it is a white country or a non-white country, and to make that accusation in this chamber, as the member for Watson did, is a disgrace. India, Deputy Speaker, again, on some of the numbers that I have seen, only 10% of the population of India actually recognised as having a good command of the English language. So to have this English language test for people that come from India or people that come from Singapore, Deputy Speaker, there is no discrimination there on the colour of the skin, the predominantly of those countries. And yet, Deputy Speaker, that is what has been implied by the member for Watson. What we should do, Deputy Speaker, the entire purpose of this legislation is to unite us all as Australians, irrespective of what our background is or whether we come from a white country, is to make sure that the thing that we all have in common, that we all have good command of the English language. So whatever country we come from, we can go out and we can integrate and assimilate, whatever word you want to use, we can all mix in as one society and we can all be Australians. We can all be proud to be Australians. That's what this legislation is about. And to have members of the Labor Party come in here and tell falsehoods about it requires a university standard of English when it clearly doesn't. And to mention white countries as having some sort of special exemption, Deputy Speaker, actually divides us. It divides us all and is demeaning of this parliament. I know that there are many members of the Labor Party that in good faith want to see Australians all united as one people, irrespective of our backgrounds. And I call on you during this debate, please do not use it as an excuse to drive a wedge between Australians, to try and divide us into different tribes. The legislation that we need and everything that all of us stand for in this parliament is all united as Australians, as one people. That is the premise, Deputy Speaker, of this legislation. And I would ask all members of the opposition to consider that when they contribute to this debate and not engage in the dog whistling that we have heard. I thank the House.
Thank the member for Hughes.